here this morning, or this afternoon. No, they did theirs this afternoon.
No, I got an afternoon meeting. Finance is going to be tomorrow.
Wait, you sent out the email with the agenda, and then I saw the agenda for the announcement for the city council meeting, and I was like, wait a second, are we going to be having a conflict? And then saw that there was earlier today.
No, the air conditioning is not coming on. It's just right.
Turn on the heat. I'm trying to save the city money. She said, jeez.
I felt it when I came in. It feels don't freak me out tonight, please.
She's the one that runs the heater in the middle of the summer.
I'm trying to say something about the electric fee, but I think this is all natural.
Well, it needs to be.
Well, see, why don't you try to save power around here?
Why is it the same?
They grew up in hardware stores. You wanted to sell all the hammers you could possibly sell. You didn't want to save any of them. I can serve anything. So the more power we use, the more we have to sell, the more money we make. Right?
I'm scared.
That's how this works. Learn the power department.
Trying to get there.
Sell less is what we have to say. How do you kind of do less title work?
Yeah, hit record. I'm going. Well, they're not going, but they're going. I told them.
Doesn't know he's on.
Recording in progress.
All right. All right, we'll get started since we've got a quorum. So thank you, everyone, and welcome to our Power Board meeting for January, this new year. So I hope everyone had a good holiday and stuff. So we've heard from Andy that Andy wasn't able to make it. We'll see if Mark jumps on here in a few minutes, but the rest of us are here live. So let's everyone get the email of the agenda and get a second to look through that. Any questions, comments, changes?
Wait.
No, looks good. Any.
Okay, then if I
Mark.
Okay, Councilman. Okay.
Sorry about that, guy.
No, you're fine. No, welcome. That's what we said for her to give us a heads up on who jumped in. So we're just getting started, and we're just looking for a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I'll go ahead and motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, Todd did the first, and Dick did the second. Dick, would you want to start us off with a vote?
Saunders, aye.
Todd?
Spriggs, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look through the minutes that were sent out?
Yep.
Any comments, questions, concerns?
No.
Okay, motion for the minutes for December.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the December 5th, 2023 meeting.
And let's see, how about I second it?
All right, Dick did the first, Todd did the second. Todd, do you want to start us on a vote?
Sure, Spriggs, aye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. Okay, we'll turn over to Rick for Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, for item number 3, regular business.
Yeah, actually, tonight should be a pretty easy meeting, and I guess depending on how many questions you have, but it's mostly just reporting on this one. So start off with just department items. You know, we continue to see significant growth on residential, and commercials really picking up too. So that hasn't really changed. And I know Drew reported at the last meeting with the council that December they actually had the highest residential building permits they've ever had, which is really unusual for a December.
Wow.
So no significant signs of changing there. I can report that Jordan Jolly passed his 3rd year step test, which means he's got one more test, and then next December, and then he'll be full-fledged lineman. So he's doing great, and we have a really good crew. Supply chain issues continue to be a challenge. I did send out a request on some insulators, and got a report back that they're 52 to 53 weeks out. So a year on just standard stuff we used to get in 4 to 8 weeks tops. You know, we're still getting that. However, the last order of single phase pad mount transformers, they had told us like the typical 40, 50 weeks, and they showed up in about 5. So that was good. I don't know if we just had good timing, somebody had some, but that was really nice. So our peak load in December was 17.9 megawatts, which was just a little less than last year at about 18.6. Again, I think December was pretty mild. You know, there wasn't a lot of heating or cooling going on, a little bit in the morning and stuff. So another positive personnel thing to report is we have a new hire, Chad Reynolds, who took Mike Rush's place, and he comes to us from Dixie, and so he was very familiar with the software we use for development and things like that, and it's basically the same job functions he was doing there. And so he started with us, what was it, on the 20th, I think, of December, and he's hit the ground running, doing great. And so that was really good. So helped Tyler and I a bunch not to have to cover quite so much well in Mike's absence. So as far as projects, we did install and energize the new replacement feeder, basically between the pole line runs parallel to I-15 up to Buena Vista as part of the new interchange project. The original line route went through what is now going to be a detention basin, so we had to relocate it. And so that's in and complete. We still have, so that kind of completes 2 of the 3 main work areas for that project. The last one, we have 2 steel poles to install just north of Buena Vista, and that'll depend on when Dominion Energy gets their gas line relocated. And once they get that relocated, we can install the 2 new poles. The one pole where it's going is right on top of an existing gas line. And so until they get that moved out of the way, we're kind of waiting on that. So on the Grapevine substation site and Trailhead, I think we're making progress there. And I would expect we should be able to move forward with that, hopefully in the next month or so. Start seeing some dirt turn there, and I know Jeremy's working with GWC to finalize some of those details, who's the developer in that area. One project that Jake and I did in December is we took the Main Street substation offline to finish up replacing the DC panel that took forever to get in. So we had done some temporary stuff so we could use it last summer. So he installed that, and then we completed some of the SCADA checks that we needed to do on that substation. So that all turned out really well. Solar. We had 12 applications in December, so we're running about a 10 to 12 a month right now. The last, 4 or 5 months. So I would suspect we usually see a little dip after the first of the year. Usually there's a little bit of a push to try to get systems in before the end of the year for tax purposes, so we'll keep an eye on that. On the pole attachment policy, I was able to send the new updated pole data to the consultant, and they're going to send us back the new and improved recommended fees. And then once that we get that, then we'll finalize that into a document. I think we've got all of our comments ready to go, and I'm sure probably the biggest item on the system, as I'm sure everybody's well aware of, we've had a few outages here and there. And unfortunately for some people, they were affected by all of them. You know, if you're in the wrong spot in the right configuration, that's just unfortunately how it worked out. So I want to make sure you guys understand what really happened. I know there's some strange stuff out there, but this was the first one, which I think we actually reported on last time. Oh, dang it, sorry, forgot to do that. Thank you. Council room. It looked good for me right here. This is a whole 8-second video that Wayne had took, and it's hard to kind of see, but this was the one from when the truck snagged the line and pulled it down, and they were just starting to work there. So if you can see this line here is pulled down to the ground. And if you zoom in close enough, you can kind of see the other end of it here. And obviously you can see the gravel. So it didn't take too big of an investigation to figure out what had happened there. And that was, and so then we had, actually the other 3 outages were directly or indirectly caused by birds. And so this is an arrestor, and this is a cable terminator. This is where the cable transitions from overhead to underground. And you can see this burn mark. Basically, our bird friend was between here and this energized. So this is an energized piece. The steel is grounded. So they got in there, and he had a bad day. The second one, and so what we did there is we have a second circuit in Parkway that's not, right now isn't being used, so we transferred the load to the second circuit, and its friend did basically the same thing on the other circuit.
Crows were supposed to be smart.
Well, it's actually, I'll tell you a little bit more here in a minute. You know, this substation's been energized for about 6 years. These are the first critter or animal bird type problems we've had at that location. But if you go drive up the Parkway, there's And so some of the things that we did is, they call them bird guards. We added these, and then this jumper from the arrestor up, it's not full insulation, but it's partial insulation that should prevent that, or at least dramatically reduce the risk. And so we have taken measures to help address that. Again, you can see this on this. So we had to take the substation out of service so they could get up there and do that. I mean, we transferred load to adjacent substations. One interesting thing about this, I took these pictures when we did some switching last week up there. And if you look really close, you can see a bird sitting right there. And
He's not big enough to close the circuit.
well, he was, but he's dead.
Oh,
So he's just laying there.
oh, okay.
So the crews came up and this was after this guard was put on. And so the crews came up with their hot stick and were able to pull him off. But the interesting thing about him was he wasn't burned. And we didn't have any operations. So we're not 100% sure if he's flying along and hit the bus or, and broke his neck kind of thing, kind of like flying into a window. But there was no burn marks on him, and there was no outages or operations caused by, but there was one they found a week or so before that was similar that didn't have burns either. So not liking birds this month. So I guess the main thing on that is, yes, we've done some things to try to minimize those risks. And two, there just seems to be a whole lot of bird activity. When I was up there, when we were doing the switching, you walk in and they just all take off. And so it's kind of interesting. So those affected primarily the Brio area and some of the area west of there on both of those. Even though it was on two different structures, how we transferred the load, just they got in the wrong spot at the wrong place. Then the bigger outage that was on the Friday before Christmas, this was just some more pictures on different guarding. And we've had we've had foxes, raccoons, rats in pad mount switchgear, snakes in switchgear, so they don't read signs very well, and so unfortunately,
generate heat? Is it warmer up there, or?
it might be some, because if nothing else, the radiant heat from the sun and stuff, it could be contributing. But again, it hasn't been super cold either to where.
Yeah.
Then this was the kind of the bigger one that affected about 2/3 of the system. This is on the line, I guess it's on 2nd South and 100, or Main Street and 2nd South. About 2 spans away from where Mike Roosh used to live. And actually, fortunately for us, and it helped identify where the problem was, is our city attorney, Thad, his daughter happened to be in the front yard when this happened. And so she could point pretty definitively of where the problem was, and it would allow us to identify fairly quickly where it was and switch around it.
So it's right by Thad's house, in front of
Yeah.
Thad's house?
Just to the west of Thad's house, where the line turns and goes up Main Street. And you can see there's, and this is where the flash point was on the base of the insulator. And so this is there's a switch there, and you can see the birds like to hang out on it. And he commented that there's birds on there all the time. And so what happens, particularly if we haven't had rain for quite a while, they sit up there, do their business, and it creates a path. And then if you remember that Friday morning, we had a really light rain, just enough to moisten this up and make it really nice and conductive across there.
So the bird droppings close the circuit.
Basically, yes. You get them a little wet, and so a couple of things we've done here is we've changed, this is a porcelain, which is basically the same stuff that's in your toilet that these are made out of. This is an older part of the transmission system. So we've changed the insulators on this structure to a polymer, which has really narrow fins, or skirts we call them, that the birds usually don't like to sit on quite as well as these bigger ones. And then of course they didn't send me a picture after they cleaned it. They cleaned all this off, and anyway, so this wasn't a direct, I guess indirect. There was a whole bunch of birds that helped cause this one.
So what's the process when that goes out? You have to replace, we have those on hand
Yes.
and
Yes.
just have to go up and replace
In
them?
fact, by the end of that day, the crews came from, one left the movie, Traden left his girlfriend at the shop. But they actually, by the end of, within about 2 or 3 hours after they had this replaced to where we could use it. And then they came back the following, I guess Christmas was on Monday, so it was Tuesday, and then they redid all the insulators on that particular structure. So with they call it a loop system, we were able to switch around this, so we were de-energized this piece and then routed the power a different way up through Main Street Sub. So had we not known exactly where from the ground, you can't see a lot of this. And so having the knowledge of where it happened did speed up the process.
So what did it do? Did it spark or something? What did she see?
She heard it and saw
She heard
a
it.
flash. Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty loud. When you get an arc like that, you'll definitely know it has that definite 60 hertz hum. And
So we ever had that happen before? Is that a new?
we haven't had so much here. When I was at St. George, we had it quite often. Of course, they had a lot more. And we've identified, Wayne went and counted, we have about 100 of these insulators on the system. And so
That are horizontal like that?
Yeah, and that's a real standard configuration. Most of the newer ones are polymer, so it's kind of a plastic, and the skirts are kind of flimsy. And what it does is it creates, we call it a leakage distance. So if the arc has to go up and down, well, what happens in here, that fills all that up and it compromises that leakage distance. So we'll look at it and probably over the next year or two, try to replace as many of these insulators as we can to reduce that. Again, it's not a guarantee. The other thing we'll do when we do that is we, instead of a 69 kV insulator, we buy a bigger one for the next voltage class up, which gives a longer distance, which helps that as well. But actually, it was interesting. I was talking to the substation tech at St. George and told him what we found, and he says, "Oh yeah, that happens a lot." So
It was just weird that you had all those things happen right before Christmas.
right before Christmas in a fairly short period of time, and like I say, it's unfortunate, but you know, things happen. I mean, equipment can fail, cables can fail, different things like that, and
Is that something that a utility sometimes would power wash those things? I mean, you would think that we would have had it happen more often. with 100 of them out there.
You know what typically will happen is you'll get a pretty good heavy rainstorm
And it clears it out.
and it kind of washes it, it kind of power washes itself. And when I was at St. George as well as this, the most common recipe is you get a long period of time without any moisture and got lots of birds, and then you get a real light rain, just enough to not wash it off, but just enough to moisten it to where it'll track across there. So anyway, so that's what happened. Like I said, I know there's all kinds of things being purported and not believed, but that is what happened on all those instances. Any questions more on that, or the local system kind of?
No, just have our sympathies. It was a great holiday for you.
Oh, I was only out for a couple hours. Like I say, the crew was there until, they were probably there 5 or 6 hours at least, so. But they always, jump in and help out. Shifting to the UAMPS report, December was the UAMPS annual meeting that we held in Salt Lake. We had the APPA, new APPA, American Public Power Association CEO, give a half-hour or so presentation. Talked mainly about what challenges he sees as they represent most all the municipal utilities in the United States. He talked about the challenges that he sees as a group. It's really no different than ours. Intermittent resources, wind and solar replacing more baseload resources, load growth, cybersecurity, supply chain issues are the main areas he talked about. Again, it was just right down our list, basically. Mason Baker, the UAMP CEO, outlined similarly some of the challenges he sees for the UAMPS members, and the resource needs are top on his list. And one of the things he's working on is to be, I guess, maybe more directly involved and working individually with the utilities of what they see that they need and how you can solve some of your resource problems. So I'm going to welcome that a little more hands-on approach with us. And I hope at one of the next meeting or two to actually, he wants to get out and meet as many power boards and councils as he can. And with any luck, maybe in February or March, we might be able to have him come and, he can talk to you. And he's really sharp. I think he's a young kid. I think he's in his 40s, so everybody looks young to me anymore. But he's very sharp, and he's doing a terrific job.
40 is young, Rick.
Thank you.
Well, 60-something's feeling old, so. For wholesale power purchases, I reported last month that we did buy gas for the next 5 years. We still have some needs for the upcoming July, August, and September period. One of the things we were able to do, and it came together pretty short order in kind of in conjunction with the UAMPS meetings, is we were able to purchase 3 megawatts of IPP power via Bountiful. And so we'll buy it from them. And it looks like it'll be at a good price point for the summer product, as well as it has a load shape to it. So most of the time we have to buy a high load product from 8 a.m. to 11 at night. And what the problem that causes, we don't need it in the morning and the late evening. So you end up buying more than you need in order to cover your peak because of that shape. And so this one will have, it's not going to match our shape exactly, but it will be much better than just a straight block. So that was really good. And in fact, Jake is working to integrate that into our model and see. I'm sure we're going to need to purchase some small amounts over the summer months still, but that was a good thing to be able to secure for this upcoming summer. So we're looking at that and just trying to figure out the best way to minimize costs. For the Central St. George project, which is our local UAMPS transmission project, I think I reported last month that UAMPS were going to file a bulk electric system exemption with Western Electric Coordinating Council to hopefully, if we can get the exemption, then we don't have quite as much baggage if we run the system down here looped. So that's been submitted. There was a simultaneous submittal with UAMPS and Dixie. Not quite sure how long WEC's going to take to come back and rule on that one way or the other, but it has been submitted and that process has started. The Nebo plant there in Payson's been running really good. They ramp down at night to the minimum load. It's about 80 megawatts, and then they'll ramp up during the day to try to follow the load patterns. And right now we have a morning peak and a evening peak as people get up in the morning and go, do their cooking and whatever at night. You can definitely see two peaks this time of year. On the government and public affairs, I think one thing at least to be aware of, I don't know how much direct influence we can have on the presidential race, but I think we need to be aware of who ends up in that election process. Could affect some of the regulations we have to deal with, particularly on fossil-based resources. And I think you can probably figure out if one side is successful and versus the other, it'll have a little kind of opposite view on fossil resources. So it's mostly to be aware of what's going on and some of the discussion that's going on at the federal level. We have applied for some grant funding to rebuild a small area of our older overhead. That's been submitted to the state. It's part of the federal money, but it's state administered, and we have not heard back on that, the response, if we're successful or not. So hopefully it will. It'll just help probably, well, obviously it would save us some money and may accelerate getting a couple of those areas done. The Steel Solar project was originally supposed to be online by now, but the first phase won't be till next month. Excuse me. Sounds weird to talk about February as next month. Gotta get used to that. So the first phase should be in February of 24, and the second phase is May of 24, which is where we have the bigger amount is in the second one, which actually fits pretty well with what we've purchased for this first quarter of the month, or first quarter of the year. And then UAMPS is also working, if you remember that last agreement that was amended, part of that agreement, they were to provide space or at least make space available for a battery. So UAMPS is looking at working on that land agreement and then pursuing the costs and evaluating what it would take to install a battery at Steel or adjacent to Steel up there. So, which is right on the border of the Utah Utah-Idaho border, just off of I-15 by the steel plant up there. If you've ever been up that way, just in Plymouth. Again, a lot of work at the UAMPS level to, figure out new resources, where we're going to get them, what they're going to look like. I know we talked last month that, getting some of the transmission interconnections can take 2 to 5 years, even to get through the study process. I know there's one of the sites they had looked at in Idaho. Idaho Power's not even taken an application for over a year. And so they've been shifting a little bit, looking at what projects are already in the queue. And so we're kicked off a study project for a solar with battery that already has their interconnection agreement in place, and basically could cut off up to 2 years to get that going. So we'll see how that goes. They're still working on the geothermal study project. I hope that they'll have a term sheet pretty soon to us. Those negotiations taking a little longer than originally anticipated. And the wind project, which is some more pictures. This is the Horse Butte Wind Project up in Idaho, outside Idaho Falls. One of the turbines had a lightning strike, and this is what happens to the blade when it gets hit by lightning. So it's an expensive lightning strike. And this was, you can see the cranes and the size of the cranes that they need to replace, and they can't replace just a blade. They have to do it as a match set. And so we do have some spare sets on site. And so fortunately, the replacement set was readily available, but it does take a little bit of time. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to see some of these pictures of how big they are when they get on the ground. You've probably passed them at times on the freeway, and they're pretty long. Last but not least, on the carbon-free project, we're successful in doing a pretty quick wind down and to reduce costs. As previously reported, there's still some non-reimbursable costs that we'll have to pay. We're working on getting what that amount is, and the timing and from UAMPS on that. So more to come on that particular item. So, and hopefully, I've been having Rachel send out this UAMPS monthly report. So hopefully you've been able to look at that and not have to bore you with some of the gory details. But if you got questions on any of them, let me know. Washington participates in most projects, but not like the Craig Mona, the Hunter, and IPP. At least as an owner, we don't participate in that. So that's really my report, and like I say, it was pretty, with the exception of the outages, fairly uneventful. But and again, it's unfortunate that happens, and that it happened in such kind of rapid succession, particularly for that one particular area. So now Dick's house out there, didn't even know what was going on.
Yeah. Well,
Well, you knew what was going on, but you had power.
saw all the things on the internet, and Lori and I are going, "Oh, poor Rick." And then it would go again.
Yeah. So, thick skin.
That's life. Things like that happen.
Yeah, and I think Rachel, she actually put together for the January newsletter, just a reminder for people, they need to have flashlights, food, water, medications. I mean, even if we do our best effort, things will happen from time to time, from animals to cars hitting poles to equipment's, will fail at times. And, we need to all be prepared to a reasonable degree. And I think the longest of any of those 4 outages was an hour and a half. So,
That's what I'm impressed about. That's why I asked the process of the repairs and things and what you do after, because it seems like it happens. People panic, obviously, and it seems like a long time. But it really is impressive how quickly it gets back on.
and that's why when we try to create loops, and so we can isolate it down to as small as possible, and then restore power, and then we work on the problem. I mean, there's parts of the system that, we can't do that fully, but most places we have a redundant feed that once we know where the problem is, we can usually work around it relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you. Is there any other items of business that we've got?
or anything I should be aware of that,
No, not that I can think of.
And in the coming months, we've talked about different issues that we'll be addressing, but there's,
hopefully we'll have the pole attachment soon. Depending on how fast the consultant turns that around, but that'll probably be the next bigger thing, and then we'll present on the aftermath of the CFPP, what that cost is, and so.
okay,
And then we got the metering coming up too.
Yes, and that's between Mike and the holidays. I have not got back to it, but I'm really, really close to getting that to where we can evaluate and move forward, make a selection and move forward. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that's actually probably the biggest thing that's on the horizon.
okay. Thank you, Rick. If you'll also thank the crews for us and behalf of the city and stuff, so. Okay,
Thank Rachel for doing all the work, the hard work.
yes. Okay, thank you.
She gets all the fun Facebook stuff.
Somebody's got to do it.
Lovely comments. You just have to refrain. That's what I keep having to tell myself is every time I see him, but. Okay, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, Dick first, Todd second. Todd, would you start us?
Spriggs eye.
Dick?
Saunders, aye.
Dinsmore, aye. So we'll adjourn until February 6th. Okay, we'll see you then. Thank you.